Hello everybody and welcome to an Arkham Town Hall. Today I'm joined by Daniel from Quick Learner. How's it going?
Pretty good. We've been recording a bit all day, and I'm excited to do some more.
Yes, it is. It just never stops, doesn't it?
All the content.
So if you don't know what these Town Hall videos are, these are like very kind of like free-form discussions where we have a topic that we're gonna just like bounce about for the next like hour at the most, and we have we're doing this live on Twitch, so we have chat. They can ask questions as we go, and then we are going to interact with those questions. Consider us like I don't want to call us like politicians, but we're kind of like politicians. We're having just a Arkham forum right now. We're just everyone's chatting their stuff, and it's gonna be a great time. So our question for this one is not type here. Oh no, I made another one. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, third. Oh, okay. All right. Here we go. We're good. No, I made another one. That's okay. All right. Make it big. And then I want to just delete this. Oh, God. Welcome to PPG. All right, here we go. We got this. R is what rules would you like to see changed in Arkham Horror? All right, then we can make it even bigger. There we go. So that is our topic here. I don't mind starting. I can set us up with a really easy, like a really easy softball on this one. So there's a lot of, if I could, like some of my rules go back to the start of the game, and some of them I would love to see like modified as well. But I think that there's a lot of, at this point with Arkham, there's a lot of rules that have kind of just don't really like fit in the way that the card pool has evolved. And I think a big one for me at the start of this is just that I wish that firearms and melee weapons had a bigger divide to them. And I mean this in like not just in terms of card balance, but an actual mechanical function. I have this as an example here with the upgraded 45 automatic, where you ignore the retaliate keyword for the attack, right? I feel like that could have been one of two potential options that the designers could have explored to make firearms better. And at least like different from machete or like melee weapons, but in the core set it was kind of just machete, knife, and I guess switchblade was there too, right? So like these are one of those things that I think that having like a dividing factor between them could have been really beneficial. The alternative is something that we actually saw come up later in the game in the form of Sharpshooter and British Bulldog. In Mansions of Madness, which is another Arkham Files game, you actually, all guns use the foot skill, the agility skill of the investigator. Melee weapons always used like strength or combat, but in Mansions of Madness, the firearms, you actually had to use your agility, your dexterity, your ability to be like have finesse, right? And I think that would have been another thing that would have been really cool to see from the start of the game. Because it makes sense to me, right? Like, and I think it's actually kind of, it cascades where because fist is called combat, right? It makes it so that in Mythos tests that have combat kind of have a little bit of dissonance to them, right? Like I understand there's the idea of like punching down the door is combat. But then there is the card from Innsmouth, which is like, it's like Kiss of Brine, and it's a combat test.
I was thinking of that one too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's one of those things where if like, instead of it being called combat, if it was called like strength, for example,
yeah,
that could have been another thing to help like just like actually make it work better. So to me, if I had to like put this into like a 1 point, is I wish that firearms always ignored retaliate, or firearms used agility from the get-go.
So let's talk about what they did do, which was they put it on encounter cards instead. So enemies, especially in the first one, Dunwich, cared about you using melee versus ranged, right? Or firearms. And it's kind of weird. Why didn't they put that inherently on the cards themselves rather than put it on the enemies? I can kind of get it for like spells or whatever, because these are like ghosts or something. But
Yeah.
for this idea of being able to maybe shoot something in the air like the avian thrall, yeah, it makes sense. But you could maybe do that instead on the player cards, so you're not like trying to, maybe this is a different conversation altogether, but trying to prepare for particular encounter cards that may or may not show up in your campaign. So it's like they had some idea, but it just turned into something that people, I would say, more or less ignore. I don't
Yeah.
think they pay attention to that when they're deck building.
Yeah. And I think that if they kept doing that, there would be less of a divide between like between firearms and melee weapons, right? Because coming into House Always Wins in Dunwich with like just a machete, it's gonna go bad, right? Like you're gonna have a problem. Like that conglomeration of spheres is gonna come in and he's gonna ruin your day. And then that's gonna carry over into the avian thralls, right? Like not everyone can be like Nat Cho and just naturally punch a bird out of the sky, right? So like there has to be some sort of like plan to it. Because I agree. I think that their initial philosophy of design on that was the idea of it's on the enemies, right? Like the enemies are going to be our dividing line for that kind of thing. Yeah, but then they just stopped.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think there needed to be something, because now, because the card pool is so old, it's really hard to go back and fix these issues, right? The whole philosophy, even of how much damage different weapons do, is already set in stone. The combat ability, having ignore, retaliate be on every other gun would be cool, but then what do you do with the 45 automatic that's upgraded? Like, what does that now give you other than the +2 or +1 compared to the level 0?
Yeah. And that's like one of those things where like this is kind of like this is a rules change that would have to happen from like day 0, right? Like this would have to be like part of the core philosophy of the design from back in the day. Because currently, I agree, right? Like they can't just change it. Like I think that would cause more issues when it's probably better if they just like designed cards that made guns better, right? Like if they followed that approach. Because like even though there's a lot of people who poo-poo on locked and loaded, an extra bullet on each of your guns, if you're playing small guns, is a good way to make that stuff more consistent, right?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think that all the level 0 guns are, well, I don't know. Machete is so good, but it's in Guardian. But for the most part, the level 0 guns are better than the limited number of melee assets that we have. It's just that they quickly get outclassed. And the upgraded guns, to me, are just a different, they're just a different thing. They're for situations that are maybe not as likely. And not running out of ammo is maybe a bigger thing than the designers thought. Like maybe they wanted to give you that feeling of you don't have unlimited resources when you're fighting with things. Like you run out of weapons. You know how the prologue of TCU, not that we've played it recently, you start with, I think it's if you play Gabriella, you start with only 1 or 2 ammo on the gun,
but like damage on the thing because you shoot it,
but damage on it, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of neat, that sort of idea of you're in the middle of the battle. It's not that you have something that works forever.
Yeah. So that's actually a very apt point, because I remember I read one of the designer articles from MJ back in the day, and she said that some of the kind of like design philosophy for Arkham was about telling that story. And there was an example that she gave that was Roland Banks is cornered by a ghoul, and he has one shot left in his gun, right? Like that tension that amounts, where it's like there's a ghoul here, I have one shot left, I have to make this and kill the ghoul, or that ghoul's going to kill me. So like the firearms live in that world where like they work really nice for that, right? Like they tell that story, but that story doesn't win the game as consistently, and people like winning the game, right?
This might be a tangent, but maybe not. But remember when machete was tabooed?
Yes, I do. It was a very good taboo for the time.
Yeah, but I kind of think it was to balance the firearms too,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So what's changed? There's just better options anyway than machete.
That's kind of it. Just it kind of got like power crept out, right? Like, so the thing was that like machete, you generally did upgrade out of machete in the early game, right? Like you would get like a lot of people would buy the shotgun, the lightning gun with at that time, right? And then the problem was that melee weapons got better upgraded stuff, right? Like we saw like survival knife. We saw, I mean, runic axe was a while until we got that, right? But like we saw like melee weapons start to actually like live in that experienced level where you didn't really need them anymore. So like you didn't like really need machete as much anymore. So like spending the experience on machete just meant that machete was never played as opposed to something that you bought, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Okay. There's a question in the chat about using agility for firearms. Would that just sort of be unusable for Guardians or harder to justify in Guardians?
I don't. Okay, again, this is coming from the philosophy of Day Zero, right? Where I think that, well, one, it would make the rogues playable in the core set. Rogues had a rough, like, can you just imagine Skids with a 45 automatic, but he could use his foot instead, right? Like, he's able to attack at 5. Like, Skids now makes a name for himself in the core set, right? The Derringer, like if we just pull up that gun, right? It's just like one of those things. I think it's the 18 Derringer?
41?
41, yeah. The Survivor one's the 18. Yeah, the 41 Derringer, right? Like, if we just look at this guy, that came in the core set, because we're talking about just kind of like the core set here. This is now, you get +2. So Skids gets attack at 6. If he succeeds by 2 or more, he deals +1 damage. Alternatively, what we have in the box right now is Skids gets attack at 5, and he has to succeed by 2 to deal +1 damage, right? That's like not great. Like that, Skids is actually more reliable attacking with a machete at 4 than he is using the gun that came in his box. So I think it's not a question of wouldn't making firearms use agility further boost up rogues and diminish guardians. I think from the get-go, if the design came this way, it would actually make rogues have a place in the core set, and would also allow that weird guardian thing we see where there's like, here's that foot guardian that you all can like use these cards in, but then everyone's like, what foot guardian do you mean? Right? Like there's like Lily Chen, and like that's it, right?
And she can't take firearms, so yeah.
So it's like one of those things that I think that it's less like you have to look at it, you have to take it away from the perspective of what we have now. And I think, Nathan, I don't think you understand the point of this conversation here. This is like from the get-go. Like this is what I would want to have seen from the beginning. Right? Like this is like a rule, like a day zero change. So like the cascades that we have from this would be an inference that you would need to infer beyond just like what we have now. Because like it would have changed everything about like Arkham and like how weapons were approached, in my mind, for the better with hindsight of the 10 years that the game has been out.
So to me, the other part that is just that from the get-go question is how much damage do these weapons do by default has changed quite a bit, right? What is viable? You can see between all the different other weapons that were released in the first couple sets, where I think the designers tried to make a level 0 weapon that does 1 damage viable. At least they thought it was. Yeah. And as players, we've all been like, don't play those. Those are bad.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're not, I mean, I don't think they were trying to print things just to teach us that they're bad, but it kind of had that effect. But I kind of sympathize with the designers, and to some extent, that damage and dealing with enemies, that sort of scaling of how much an action deals damage to an enemy, especially when the numbers are all relatively low compared to games that have like enemies with 50 health or something. It's hard to balance that because the difference between 1 damage and 2 damage is double.
Yes. Yeah.
Once you get higher than that, then you've sort of diminishing returns, but it's also kind of a per action thing. And I think they missed a bit, right? If you look at the Derringer itself, I mean, you only do 1 damage if you don't succeed by 2 or more. That's like extremely bad. And there was nothing in the core set that made that probable, especially as you're saying with skids. I mean, the other one who could take it is Wendy. I mean, come on. So Firearms kind of needed something else, I think. And maybe they're playing around with what was going to be viable with the enemies and how much health the enemies had and how much fight they did, but you're right, agility or some other version of this would have matched better with the cards and the investigator. So I think they've gotten to it now. It makes more sense why we have the weapons we do today. It just feels a little bit like they if they had made these changes you're suggesting, we would have had a better definition to figure out what the rest of the card pool could look like.
Yeah, and obviously, like, my sentiment here is coming from, again, 10 years of, like, knowledge of where the game is now, right? It's like, I don't, like, think that where we are now is bad with Firearms working the way they do, right? But I think from the beginning, it would have given Rogue an identity from the beginning, right? Like, and that I think would have been super important. Because even like what they're saying in chat right now, Guardians are meant for combat and the philosophy chains later. They were, but obviously they still wanted rogues to be able to fight. So the question is, why so bad in comparison, right? And like that might be one of those things that I think stems from the fact that Firearms work the way they do. I think that is part of the issue. Yeah, all right. Let's go to one of yours.
Okay. The first one we'll do, I think, is... So, okay, for me, like, I've got a little bit of different philosophy as to what I'm talking about here. And it's more about the rules and rulings that kind of drive me crazy. But before I do that, I don't want people to think that I think the game is like in a very sad state as far as rules go. I just don't think that's true. It's easy to nitpick because there's a few things that are not great. And especially once you play the game a lot, you start seeing these sorts of things more often. And you're like, okay, there's some corner cases here or edges of the rules that are just not well defined. But by and large, I think the game has done a good job for you to read the card and understand what the card does. And only later when you try to read every word, you're like, wait a minute, what does this do? Yeah. So to me, it's less of a rules question about what's in the rule book, but rather a templating question. And I think that FFG doesn't template things very well when you start comparing cross cards and people are, looking at different cards and trying to make arguments for, well, this card does this and it says this, so therefore with this other card it must mean this. I don't think that's true anymore. Since MJ has left, I think she had like an amazing encyclopedia of the rules, but more not necessarily the rules, but the intent of what cards should do. Yeah. And what they shouldn't do. And now that she's gone, I think a lot of that knowledge has been lost, and it's hard to recreate rules as intended. I'm a real big stickler for, yes, we can't ask the designers everything, but I wish we could. I want to do that rather than following, the rules as written, because I think that they just write the rules poorly. It'd be better to know what they mean by the card, the rule on the card, or the writing on the card, rather than trying to come up with something on our own. Yeah. All right, so the couple things I want to talk about are just the ones that still I'm confused by, and I don't really want to be confused by. Before you do, I just love to add on what you just said there very briefly, because I agree. I do think that you're 100% right that MJ had like an encyclopedic knowledge of like the rules as intended, right? Because she worked on the game for so long, and I imagine a lot of it wasn't written down, right? Because like it was just like she knew, right? And because she was the head designer, everything worked, right? Someone could just ask her, or she could like be reading and just be able to put it in, right? So because of that, I feel like that's why we're kind of in like this messy situation, right? Where again, I agree. I don't think the rules are in a bad place, because I think that most of the time, if you just like rule it at your table, it's not going to actually hurt anything, right? Right.
But I am, much to the chagrin of myself and others at time, I do think that the current design team is trying to get everything sorted and like codified where they can. And I just think right now it's been in a very messy time that I'm sure we're about to see as we look at some of your examples that we have here, is kind of like how things are. So,
and I'm not going to pretend that they weren't always messy. It was just that one person, Maxine, was answering all the emails, so you kind of figured that there was knowledge behind how things should interact. And I should add that, she wasn't the only person to work on the game at the beginning, right? I think Nate French also was involved. So some of the templating is a holdover from other kinds of FFG games and might not be the best for how the game turned out afterwards.
And if you've played a lot of FFG games, especially their card games, you'll know that they are very notorious for bad templating. Like, they have some things that they do so well. Like, their action, reaction, like, wording is, like, very good. But then there's some things that they just do, like, so bad. Yeah.
So the first one I want to talk about is taking an action versus performing an action. This one still drives me crazy and I have to look it up. The problem is you'd think that these things are just the same. And maybe they are. But man, it's one of the first things that when you talk about rules with people who are fairly new is what does take an action mean, right? It means you go through the whole process of initiating and performing whatever the action is, and you're like, oh, well, is performing an action a subset of taking an action? And it turns out it isn't. But whenever you talk about Ursula, Finn, these cards make you take an action, and you say it's any type of action that is, investigate or evade. Great. That's like totally understandable in my world, even though people still have questions about, can I, use fingerprint kick? Can I use blur or something for Finn? Can I use an event? And that's fine. But then you get to performing an action and you wonder why the hell they use the word perform when they could just say take again. Yeah. Why do we need this other word?
Yeah.
So let's look at Frozen in Fear, which is the core set card that cares about this, and usually you don't pay attention, right? It says the first time you perform one of the following actions, move, fight, or evade, each round it costs one additional action. So usually this just means you are moving from one location to the next, and it costs you one more action. So you spend 2 to go from one place to the next. Well, you look at shortcut over here to the right. This is not a move action, right? This is fast. Usually this is explained as you're not spending an action, so great. Shouldn't count. Shortcut 2, which is over here on the left, is the same thing, right? It's fast to play it anyway, and then it's a free trigger, exhaust, move to a connecting location. Why should this be any different than the level 0 version? It is. This does ding you when you have Frozen in Fear in your play area, in your threat area rather. You have to spend an extra action because this is a bold designated move. Why it should be, I have no idea. Is it supposed to make you, get penalized from having Frozen in Fear? That seems ridiculous, right?
So I'll be completely real with you. I actually have never thought about this, so this is very interesting to me because these are things that have never crossed through my brain while playing Arkham. So I'm very excited to talk about this because, you're 100% right? So, this has got to be going back to the templating thing, right? This is 100% the issue where these were worded differently. Notably, they came from what? This one's done. This one's Carcosa, right? Is this Carcosa?
Yeah, just 1 year later.
So these have been designed very close to each other. So there's not really a big difference that we can blame for time, because that's probably one of the reasons why this happens, right? But what I imagine is just that, because even if this let's strip this down for myself, but also for people watching. Neither of these provoke an attack of opportunity, right? Even if they were both bold move, right? If this was choose an investigator, that investigator moves bold, right? That wouldn't provoke an attack of opportunity, right? So we know it's not because of that. I think it's just because they didn't like the idea of putting like this on that. But like, if we see, I mean, I imagine we're going to see to get over here. I don't want to step on your toes, but I'm just like kind of talking about that because it's like, it definitely seems like a weird templating issue where if they had consistency, this wouldn't have popped up, right? They should have just have always had move bold be there, right?
What about Pathfinder, right? Why doesn't that have move bold on it, right?
Pull it up just for people at home,
it's
too.
It's just, I think, confusing to people about why this should be any different. And you could say, like, just ignore it. It doesn't really matter. And that's fine. But you keep looking at the rest of the cards, and there's more than just the ones I pulled out here. And they keep using this term perform, and they've ruled based on, I mean, I can bring up the ruling. It's elsewhere. But what they've said, take versus perform, and there's a little bit of it in the FAQ, and there was a clarification for payday, which I'll bring up in a sec. But like, why did they write it differently? Is that on purpose? Is that just to confuse you? Did they always have, and this is something I'll come back on the other topic I have, did they always have this in mind that take an action and perform an action was something different?
I'm gonna wager no. And I think the issue comes from the fact that you see this a lot because, like, FFG is actually a very small company for being one of the big board game companies, right? But like in Magic the Gathering, there's like a team of people whose job is literally templating. That's like all they do, right? With this one, this is just like them making the cards, right? And like they write a word, and then like the next time they write a card, they write a different word, right? Probably that's what it's got to be, right?
And sometimes I think they just copy paste from an old card, not
100%.
thinking about, in terms of Frozen in Fear, not thinking about what it actually means or what it could mean with the interactions. And there are similar cards to Frozen in Fear out there. There's one from Scarlet Keys, I think, that says something about like you can't perform the same action twice in a row. Maybe we'll bring that one up too, because I think it's kind of crazy.
Scarlet Keys? Yeah,
it's from, I don't know. It's in the last scenario for sure if you want to look for it.
I'll go digging if it lets me download it. There we go. All right.
And then I think even in the latest set, we could download the one that is the Captivating Performer? Something also says something about performing.
Yeah, so honestly,
I'll bring up haste too, because I think
that actually is also such an important card too, because that card's power level hinges entirely on how that works, right? Like comparing the Captivating to performance to haste it's like night and day depending on how they rule it. And this is actually my big issue with again, we don't want to turn this video into just complaining about like the templating stuff, but like how I remember when Branda Gathuga, before it was ruled how it worked for its damage, it was literally split 50-50 down the middle. Yep. I can forgive like 80-20. I can't forgive 50-50 because that's like literally like the worst case scenario you could have had for that. Ah, nice, you got it, perfect.
Okay, well, we'll talk about these two, but did you get the Scarlet Keys out?
No, I'm digging for it still.
I'll let you do that. I'll keep. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep ripping on this. Yeah. So I just feel like since they've used this term over and over, it must have meant something to someone at some point. And they probably in some notes somewhere, maybe it was just in MJ's head, there's some definition of these things. Mm-hmm. And yet, I don't know what those definitions are because they've been very coy about telling us things. There was a whole discussion in our Discord. This could be another topic about what swap means.
Yeah.
It's like, who knows, because they don't actually tell us.
Yeah.
But this particular interaction is not just, hey, there's shortcut 2. Ooh, I got booted.
Yeah, you just got kicked. You keep going though. I'll fill the space and we'll get you back in. Because I can still hear you and all that.
Yeah, I got kicked at big Arkham, doesn't want me to talk about the rules.
Yeah, that's shut them down. Just a man bursting through my window, shoots me twice in the head. Still uploads the video. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. I need the views. All right, so shortcut.
All right. So I want to look at that at Payday, because there's the tabooed version changed the wording. So let's look at the original one, which uses that same perform.
Yeah. So gain 1 resource for each action you perform this turn, including this one, if it is your turn and your turn, versus gain 1 resource for each action you spent this turn. Spent versus taken and perform. We're adding a third word to the puzzle.
And the reason for this, probably, let's like get Sledgehammer out, which I bet you're talking about this in some way later too.
Yes, that's what I have this hand-eye coordination for.
Yep. I figured it's because they didn't want. So for the big Sledgehammer attack on the bottom, right? This is taking 1 action. You spend 2 other actions, and we'll get back to that later. But it's still performing 1 action, I'm pretty sure. And they didn't want you to like lose out on resources from that, I guess. So that's the way they tabooed it. It's such a minor change that it's kind of weird, but it does show you that they think that this means something different than at least spent. And for the longest time, when I thought about taken versus, oh gosh, here they are. Yeah, this one. You cannot perform the same type of action twice in a row. Don't even get me started on what twice in a row means, but okay, that's the same thing where they're using. Oh no, actually, I do want to talk about that because that matches up with captivating performance.
Yep.
So when people asked about Payday the first time, they ruled it as performing an action is any basic action taken, any effect that states perform an X action, which makes sense, any effect that states take an action. So performing is a subset of taken action at least, except for they also said free triggered abilities with a bold action trigger. And that was the part that surprised me, that something like get over here, level 2 version compared to the level 1 actually are the same, because they have got a bold on here. Then nope, I'm wrong. Neither of them, sorry, the upgrade one does not count as performing an action because it's a fast card. Fast cards are never performing an action.
Are they taking an action or no?
No, they're not that either, probably. Please.
Okay.
So let's compare that to, the shortcut, but also, what's the one that investigates for a free trigger? The Innsmouth card.
Oh, Cryptographic Cipher?
Cryptic. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, to me, it makes no sense why this card counts as performing an action on the top, and get over here, level 2 doesn't. Just because it's fast.
You know how...
that's wild.
You know how they like recently ruled with Close the Circle that like a basic action just can't require another card, right?
Yep.
I think that is like a pretty easy approach to like at least have like a baseline for it. I feel like the same sort of thing, if you spend a card or activate a card in some way, it should count as performing an action, right? Because like it's like the same sort of thing. Like you need to be able to like, because like you're right, like from just the consistency thing, this like is a performing an investigate action on the cipher, right? For either of them, right? Likewise, this should be performing an engage fight action because you spent a card to do it, right? Like it should just follow like a similar sort of like line of logic, right?
That's right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is like playing shortcut. The level 0 version is not performing a play action because, I don't know, for reasons.
Is it really just because
I just don't know why this one doesn't perform a play, but this one performs an investigate? Like that. Like
this, it seems like one of those things that there was like as you said, like when MJ is left, the idea of like because to me this is still playing an event. It's just like fast is just like, it means that it doesn't cost an action, but it's still playing an event, right? And like spending actions. So like this is like, once again, where things get messy, because even as we're talking about it here, right? Spending an action triggers attacks of opportunity, right? But not everything spends an action. Like that's kind of like what it comes down to. And just because this does not spend an action, it should still count as playing an playing an event, right?
And it does for dissonant voices, right? We do know that. It just doesn't count for the type of action you took. So that we can go to haste and the new one, captivating performance, where people are just kind of confused. I think even haste, maybe people are they're less trying to pull this sort of stuff off, but like playing shortcut and then playing get over here or something is not 2 plays in a row, which I think is a little counterintuitive.
No, it's very. I would say that's even more than a little. That's a lot. I think that's very counterintuitive. That's one of those things
because
that
you're not.
It's one of those things that like I haven't complained about this in a while, but I think that stuff like that is bad for new players, because as soon as they try to, like, there's nothing worse than trying to engage with the community and find out that you've been doing something wrong for stupid reasons, right? Like not something that you can just like find, right? And I think that's such an important thing for games as a whole, to have like nice, tight, concise rules that are able to like easily be able to be followed or discovered without having to like get in too deep. And while this game is built around complex interactions, so is Magic the Gathering, right? So, and that is a lot easier to at least parse when you put all of it together. Except for some things in Magic, there's still fucked up things, but it's not as common in Arkham as I find.
And to your point, for new players especially, people still have questions about, I think someone in the chat has, like, is get over here 2 actions, right? And most people agree on like what this means in terms of, you're just spending 1 action altogether. But a lot of new players still are confused by that, because it is kind of weird. And then adding this extra layer of like, well, how many actions are you performing here? And that's where you get to the captivating performance and say, like, does this count as only 1 of them? Does it count as 2 of them?
Yep.
Number of things in a row, like the distorted reasoning thing, like, does that mean separate actions that you take or perform, or can all be in one? I don't know, man. Like, this is why in other card games, at least in my experience, where someone has written a rules guide to every single card and spells out, like, your 5, this is what we mean by the card. Instead, we're left to just sit here and try to make our best guess.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Just tell me what it does.
Yeah. Because, like, it's true. It's and Eric and I, when we did Drown City Roundup, we had a big conversation about captivating performance, where its power level is going to rely so much on how it compares to haste. Because, like, haste, for example, if we pull up lockpicks, right? Or even actually, no, we have the cipher right here. The cipher.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to sound like a dummy when I ask this, but the top one does it trigger haste, the lightning bolt?
It does.
Okay, because it's not fast. It's not fast. Okay.
It's not fast, right?
But let's look at about the bottom one. It counts for haste as both an activate and an investigate action, right? So it does that. So then the question for captivating performance that we can't actually figure out is, how does that work? Does, like, that cancel captivating performance? Does it count as 2 of your different actions at once? Does it count as 1 of your 3 different actions? So as long as you don't activate and or investigate next, you get a new one. And, like, that's going to change completely the power level of the card, right?
Yeah. And importantly, it's not the second one. If they do rule it as, you can't do this, the second thing you do can't be shared with the action types of the first one. It couldn't be one of these free triggered abilities somewhere else. So imagine if you had like a machete first and then you use cryptographic cipher. That's good because it does count towards your 3, and investigate is not activate or fight on machete. Great. But this isn't an action. It is an action. It's performing an action, but it's not taking one. That drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like different levels of layers of trying to solve and like the complexities that come with this sort of wording and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, why don't we
That's all I got.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Why don't we bounce to hand-eye coordination too, because I think that's a good segue to talk about this card. I'll also get pushed to the limit. This drives Travis bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
Because Travis is 100% right. This doesn't make any sense, right? Like, it just, like, doesn't actually, like, make sense when you read the cards, right? Because this one, hand-eye coordination, resolve an action ability on a tool or weapon as you control without paying its action cost. If you just, like, read this, there's, like, no difference between, like, the action costs here. One just has 3, right? But it's still just an action cost, right? Like, there's nothing that implies that you can't actually do this, like, double thing, right? And then you also look at, like, this, where resolve an action ability on that asset, ignoring all cost, including its action cost. That's a good way to word it, right? Like, because, like, that gets everything solved. So then my question, and the thing I would change, is I would just change these effects to not be this way. Make them cost more experience, make a new keyword where they're like, if they still want, like, Guardian 02 to play it, have it be like, this card is, like, super, and it costs, like, too much experience, but you can play 2 of them, right? Like, balance the cards. But even then, like, it's, I don't know, it's just, I hate that these cards don't do what they say they do, right? If you just read the cards themselves. Because the cards should tell you what they do. Like, you shouldn't need to go further to find out that hand-eye coordination actually doesn't trigger this bottom thing here.
So I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
Which is when I did my spoiler for Hemlock Vale, this was mine. It was for the book at them. And it has the same thing on it, right? It has ignoring its, whatever you want to say that icon means, cost, if any. And I immediately wrote into the dev team when I got this, I said, what does this mean for Forbidden Tome? That's the one that has a bunch of actions on it, right?
Yes.
And it's this one, right?
Yeah.
Does this let you, cheese this ability or what? So I knew that this was going to be a question. We've had stuff like this before. Sign Magic 3 has the same thing, but I don't think in Mystic there's anything that makes you spend extra actions for abilities on assets. On spells would be Sign Magic 3. And Knowledge's power is exactly the same as Push to the Limit. It lets you ignore all costs.
Yeah.
But that's basically the only time we've had that ability before, ignoring action costs, and then we got them in spades in Hemlock Vale. So I was like, what does this do?
Yeah.
And they told me exactly what we now know, and is printed in the insert for the box, that it means one action. As far as balance goes, I get it. This makes sense for a level 0 card, the level 1 card. So I'm with you there. If they want to keep the templating here, it needs to be more expensive or whatever. But I think the problem ends up being that they should never. I get for like ease of reading something like Sledgehammer, the 3 actions there makes it sound like you're spending or you're taking 3 actions or something. But the reality is, in the rules, that's not what that means. It means you are taking 1 action and you are spending 2 more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's not obvious from the way that you read it. So people always have this question of ignoring its arrow cost means, well, its arrow cost is 3.
Yep.
But that's not what that means. It means it's an activate ability that costs you 2 additional actions. And I think that sucks because the iconography there is completely misleading.
Yeah, and it's actually something that we see pop up a lot in Core Set is people ask, does this make me take 2 attacks of opportunity, right? And everyone says, no, it's just spending it's one action that costs 2. It's kind of like this is double, right? Like this is double, or like in this case, this is the sledgehammer is triple, right? Like that's kind of like what it is. It's kind of like those, like one of those things.
So when you read this as without paying its arrow cost, it sounds like I'm ignoring all of the arrows that are here.
Yes,
but that's
not the case.
Not really what they mean.
Yeah, it should be something along the lines of like resolve and action ability on a tool or weapon asset control, reducing its like arrow by 1, right?
Exactly.
Like like it should have just been like something like that, and that would have been huge for helping the legibility of those cards, right?
And there's so much room here. They could have said that. I know on something like Flurry of Blows, there's not much room, but they could template it in a way that no one would be confused, and yet they chose to run with this. I get it. On Sign Magic, that's the way they did it before, but there was really no question there, right?
Yeah.
And you do pay the charge, obviously, for those spells too, but I don't think anyone ever cared about that.
Yeah, that, because that's like the thing. But like it's one of those things that would made it so apparent and frustrating is that both of these were in the same set, like the same cycle.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So why is push to the limit ignore all costs? I've got a sneaky suspicion that it's just an effect that really wasn't balanced around something like Sledgehammer, but rather because you're choosing something in the discard pile, you can't really resolve abilities that have additional costs like exhaust or spending a supply or ammo. So how could you possibly ignore spending a supply when it doesn't have any on it? How can I exhaust a card in my discard pile? You can't do it. So they just said ignore all the costs, and that means additional action costs too. And they said, oh well.
Yeah. And
we have no other way to fix that problem.
I mean, even like if we look at it like this, if we look at hand-eye coordination, right? And it's like, let's just say we copy push to the limit here, right? So resolve an action ability on that asset, ignoring all cost. What if it was like resolve an action ability on a tool or weapon asset you control, ignoring 1 action cost, right? Like they say like 1 action. They just say 1 and then the arrows, right? That would work. Because the thing that's like also just sickening is I do think that like it doesn't make hand-eye coordination a bad card. I think like still sledgehammering for 2 is still very viable, but like it makes me like just angry when I see it, you know, because I'm just like, I wish this was just like templated better. And again, it like goes to that point of the sympathy for, because they don't have that person on the design team, as far as we know, that like his job is just, they just sit in an office all day and they just are like at the Magic the Gathering, like Matt Tabak's rule team, who's just like, I'm working on templating all these cards today, looking at like all these years and being like, how do I make this work in a way that people can just like understand? It's just like they get the cards, they design the cards, and then the cards go, right?
Want to know something funny?
Maybe, sure. Oh.
Why does this quick draw holster, the bottom ability here, say perform a fight action without paying its, activate cost? Why does it say perform and hand-eye coordination says resolve?
Resolve. Interesting. So where does resolve fit into the perform, take, or
bend?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might make the argument that this is a fast card, so it doesn't perform an action.
Yeah, but it does.
But push the limit doesn't say that. It's not fast. I don't know.
Oh, I was gonna say, so like that's you're saying like resolve is how they showcase that it's fast and not performing, but then as you see right here, it doesn't carry over to push to the limit, which is also pretty frustrating.
Yep. Why did this say perform a fight action? Oh my god.
All right.
Anyway.
We have like 12-ish minutes left. We can go over, so why don't we go to your what I assume is token related.
Yeah. Okay. From the core set, they always had the ability to reveal multiple... I'm already using the word. Pull multiple tokens out of the bag and do something about that, right? They've always had that. I guess we should have put Grotesque Statue because it's not a confusing thing on its own. But the question is always about, what do you do with the other token? So it says here, reveal 2 tokens instead of 1. Choose one of these tokens to resolve and ignore the other. So we've got a couple words that are not really defined anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Reveal, resolve, and ignore. One of the classic questions people ask in the
Resolve.
Forset
Sorry,
or
resolve is on. Where were these? This is now resolves here now too. Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're pulling on the yarn a little bit and unraveling things.
Yeah.
Okay, so shriveling, this is from Dunwich, but the level 0 does the same thing. If a skull, cultist, tablet, elder thing, or auto-fail symbol is revealed during this attack, take 2 horror. Everyone always asks, if I use Grotesque Statue or Alt McBride or whoever else to reveal multiple tokens, does that mean I just take 2 horror even if I don't resolve it? And the answer that we were given at the very beginning is no. When you ignore a token, treat it as if it was never revealed. Which makes sense, because otherwise this card is a lot worse. Okay.
Man, I just gotta say right now, unfortunately, I'm so upset that this shriveling, I mean, like, I understand why. It's because of Rex's curse. I mean, even if Rex's curse, this should have just said, if a skull, cultist, tablet, squid, or autofail symbol is resolved during this attack.
Resolved. Yep.
When they had it on, that honestly has just made my day much worse.
I'm sorry. This one's, I've had this in for a long time, like, annoyed by this. And then, as we'll get to historically, the newer stuff that made people ask questions. But so this has always been confusing, and honestly I've had a hell of a time trying to, I have like this draft of a video talking about token manipulation on my channel, and people keep asking, make this video, and I'm like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the designers think anymore, and I put out bad information, people yell at me because I don't understand it either. Okay, so yes, it should just say, if it is resolved, take 2 horror. So what does reveal mean to you when you read the word reveal? Not just for these cards, but when the game asks you to reveal a chaos token, like, what does that mean?
That means I put my hand into the bag and go like this, and I reveal it. That is what reveal means to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the act of pulling and revealing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of starts to remind me like that needs some rules baggage with it, because it's like revelation for weaknesses. People are always like, if I, discard the card from my deck or something in Dunwich, do I resolve do I draw those cards, the revelation effect on a weakness that got discarded? And the answer is no. I know it says revelation, and even if you reveal it to everyone, and it doesn't mean that you're drawing it. And it's just a poor choice of words. They should not be using the word revelation when you're revealing things. This is sort of the same thing. If you pull the token out of the bag, you are revealing it. In fact, it tells you reveal 2 chaos tokens instead of 1. But yeah, it doesn't mean that. It says, oh, actually, you don't reveal those at all because you're ignoring them. Ignore not in the rules reference at all either. So the very first thing I think that's kind of funny about the Dunwich Legacy is you get Rex's Curse. So when you would succeed at a skill test, return the revealed chaos token to the bag and reveal a new one. Doesn't say anything about ignoring the old one.
That's true. It actually technically doesn't. Yeah.
Maybe it should, but there's a ruling on this from MJ back in the day that if there is something like you pull out a cultist token that says, if you fail, place 1 doom on the nearest enemy or something, you put this back in the bag, you pull another token, you fail, you put a doom on the nearest enemy, even though it's no longer in play. It doesn't say ignore the effects or anything like that. That's weird.
That's weird. I actually did not know that. I did not know about that.
I mean, I don't think you're missing anything.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah. Because it technically, and I mean, I feel like honestly that's a gotcha. Like that is like, they were like, that was something that they did not intend to be brought up, but someone probably pointed it out, and then they were just like, oh shit, I guess that's technically how it goes,
Okay, so the new version of Rex's Curse, the advanced one that came with the parallel, says something different because you're not putting the token back. When
Yeah.
you would succeed a skill test, reveal additional one. If this effect causes you to fail, shuffle it back in your deck. Okay, so this one doesn't have that problem because you're not actually putting that additional token or the original token back in. So much cleaner. Probably the original should have said something like this, or I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually kind of why I like the advanced curse, just because it's easy. It's less annoying to play with. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to throw the tokens back in. It's
Yeah.
just a nicer effect for playing. So already the question of like, what does it mean to reveal token? Do you still do the effects on a token? Was present, or maybe they just forgot to say ignore. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's been a number of other like token manipulation things, but I'm just going to highlight a few because we're going to be out of time, about how reveal versus resolve has they must have had an idea. So I
Yeah.
did not realize this until we played our curse decks together, that Cryptic Grimoire, this is the one we're not playing with actually, but says after you resolve one or more curse tokens during a skill test. Doesn't say reveal. You have to resolve them. So that one's pretty obvious that it doesn't work if you cancel the curse token with grotesque statue.
Yeah.
This one says choose one to resolve. This one has to be after you resolve it. Great.
Yeah.
And in fact, we talked about how for the Rod of Carnimagos, which everyone has an opinion about, this one says that you just reveal tokens. Okay. And then for each curse you reveal, you get to detach a rod. So there's no putting extra secrets on the Cryptic Grimoire from the rod because this one makes you resolve them.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet, Eye of Chaos, which came out in the exact same set, has that same for each token that's revealed chaos curse token. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Again, just templating stuff, man.
Yeah. But it's like they knew what they were doing with the Cryptic Grimoire. So it's like they had the tools to do this, and then they didn't.
Yeah.
And then there's Book of Living Myths, which
yes,
caused a big conundrum here, because this says when a chaos token would be revealed at your location, instead you exhaust this, you search the chaos bag for a bless or curse, whichever there's more of, and resolve it instead. It doesn't say reveal. It just says resolve.
So then it
Is
turns
it
off
still
any
inside the bag?
it turns off any reveal stuff that would trigger.
That was the question, right? And they walked it back, but people said, wait a minute, what do you mean it won't proc my Eye of Chaos? Like, why am I playing
Or
Book
like
of Living Myths?
or even more obvious, the Ancient Covenant, right? Like that sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So people were really annoyed at this, because at that ruling, because it doesn't, what is this card doing for you if you are resolving it instead? But the reason why I asked the question a few minutes ago about what does reveal mean to you, this is nuts if this doesn't reveal the token. Like, what are you not doing? Are you just like looking inside the bag, opening the bag up and saying, I resolved that one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's the one I want. Wild.
All right, I'm done.
Okay, so let me ask a question. Is there any precedent for Rod of Carnimagos, if it works positively with curse tokens, to also work similarly to Rex's curse?
Okay, let's walk through that. So
like, you know how like it's like you reveal a skill, when you succeed a skill test, return the reveal token to the bag. Yeah. If there was one that just says like Scultus, like Cultus, like, because I know it's not during the skill test, but I feel like that would actually make this card even more consistent for me, right? Like, if it's going to trigger the curse tokens that trigger it, I feel like also like, I don't know, it's just assume that if it's like revealed, right, you also have to trigger like the cultist token, right? Like if it's just like, if it comes out, if they're not ignored, you know, like if you fail, place a doom on this.
That's true, right? I kind of agree, but they did rule that you're not supposed to trigger any of the effects on the tokens that are revealed with the rod. But it probably should.
I mean, yeah, I agree, because to me, before I learned about the Rex's Curse thing, I agree. But now that I learned about this Rex's Curse thing, I think that if a token is not ignored, it should be active during the test. Because Rod of Carnimagos works positively, it should also work negatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. They could also just not make this happen during a test or whatever, but it's just emblematic of this whole question of what do you use the chaos tokens for? And in some cards, it's just random effects. We see that with 21 or Bust. We see that with the Gaze of Oroch. And it's just a different way to get a random effect that you can kind of stack a little bit sometimes with the curse tokens. And then sometimes the chaos tokens are there for the modifiers on a skill test. And the more they try to conflate these things where they happen at the same time, they need to be tighter with their wording.
Yes, 100%. And I think as we all just, I think if you like going back to my firearm thing, right? At the beginning of the game, if this shriveling just said, if one of those symbols is resolved during this attack, things would have made so much better foundation going forward, right? Because like Cryptic Grimoire works very well for comprehension, right? I think Eye of Chaos, for each curse token resolved during this investigation. Like, I know the idea is they probably wanted to make it a bit more open where, like, if you used, like, something to, like, then put it back in the bag after, like, is it technically still resolved? But at the same time, if they just, I feel like there needs to be more limitation on what you can do with a card to make things neater overall, right? And if this just once again said, for each curse token resolved during this investigation, like that is also just, again, really simple to understand.
And for the longest time, people said reveal means resolve, except for the ignore issue. And we were all very happy about that, I guess, because we're just like, yeah, they're used interchangeably in the same way that cancel and ignore mean the same thing, as far as I know. Why is it that they, sort of change that idea is beyond me. But if it were me, if it were up to me, if FFG hires me tomorrow, I would say, you know what we're going to do? I know everyone in this office is allergic to irradiating cards, but I'm irradiating everything like Shriveling, Azure Flame, and making them all say resolve.
Yeah. And like it's Dice Gods is saying the FFG definition of reveal effectively equals resolve, which is very counterintuitive. They should be separate. Revealing should be taking a token out of the bag. Resolve should be committing the effects of those tokens, like onto the test. Like that should just be what it is. Yeah. And like then and then ignore works perfectly because you don't resolve ignored tokens, right? And like it's one of those things that it just makes it like we have words. We might as well use them. Like we could do like a whole video about evade in this game.
Yeah.
Right? Because like that is a lot, right? Overloaded. Like that is like there's so much baggage on that word because they don't have a separation like damage and like clue, right? Like discovering a clue or like investigate. Like, could you just imagine if like let's just like pull out working a hunch, right?
Yeah, discover a clue. Imagine if it said
investigate your location, like automatically investigate your location, right? Like that's what it is. Like that's actually what it is, right? Like that would be a nightmare, right? Like
obscuring fog, your location gets +2 investigate.
Like even like it's one of those things where like I'm trying to just think of an example. Like cunning distraction, right? So evade action. Automatically evade all enemies at your location. Like, would it have been that bad if this just said automatically like exhaust and disengage all enemies at your location? Right? Like it's more wordy, but it probably would have saved some. But again, we'll touch on that in a future roundtable. Sorry, a future town hall, because there's a lot there.
Let me just throw this in though, since you brought it up. People get very confused about pickpocketing because after you evade an enemy, they think that failing an evade should count. And I think they're not. I mean, they're wrong, but I can see why they.
Yeah, they're wrong, but they're not wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I still have three more things, and then also you can put on this, and because that was a good one. So we should definitely do another one of these town halls in the future because I think there's a lot to mine here. As well, if you're watching, if you liked this two-person town hall format, let me know. If you want any topics for future town halls, whether it be me and Daniel, me and someone else, let me know in the comments as well. Thank you for joining me. I had a great time. And honestly, this shriveling resolve is actually, that ruined my day.
You usually don't see me, my blood start to boil about Arkham. I try to keep things level-headed, but it drives me crazy. Like, it seems so obvious, and honestly, both of these things are, I just hate them. But yeah. I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning of the video. By and large, I love this game.
Yes. I mean, like, it's fair to have criticisms, right? And I think these are very founded criticisms. And I've said it before that this, while a toy, board games are still a form of art. Like chess is one of the greatest pieces of art ever made, which some people might not understand what I say by that, but like it's expression, right? And art lives to be criticized, and this is part of us criticizing that kind of creation, right? So I gotta say thank you to all of you patrons for joining us and supporting the channel for as long as you have. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much. We'll be back very soon for another Arkham video. It's going to be Rogue Week coming up in the near future, so get ready for that. Thanks for watching, and thanks again for joining me. I had a great time doing this. Bye!